Hello, welcome to Japan and Korea MINIPEDIA. This is the seventh session of the series, and we'll discuss politics and government part 2. I'm Daniel Rowe, and I'm going to upload this show basically on Tuesday and Friday every week for many years to come, I hope. So your continued interest and participation will be very much appreciated. But today we'll talk about the political system of Korea and Japan in comparative perspective. This is a really quick summary of the political systems of two countries. In terms of government system, Korea is a presidential system. Today, President Yoon Suk-yeol is still visiting the United States, where Japanese Prime Minister Kishida is also in presence. So Japan has a parliamentary system, and head of government of Korean politics is president, and the Japanese case, head of government is prime minister. But head of state in Japan is emperor, as we discussed in the previous session. There have been 13 presidents in Korea so far, which is since 1945. And Japan is far more prime ministers so far, 35, because Japanese modern political history is a lot longer than the Korean one. As you remember, Korean Yi dynasty ended in 1910. From then, up to 1945, basically Korea was colonized. So any modern political system could begin after that. So, in the post-war period, we have had 13 presidents so far. So if we take the average in the last several decades, Korean political leader presidents' tenure in average was 5 years, almost 6 years. On the other hand, Japanese prime minister's tenure is slightly longer than 2 years, because there have been so many changes in government, incumbent party, which we'll talk about from now. And the longest tenure has been taken or enjoyed by President Park Chung-hee of Korea. He was in power for 16 years. On the other hand, the Prime Minister Abe Shinzo, who stepped down and also had a very tragic accident lately, had the longest term, almost 9 years, 8 years in 8 months. And shortest tenure held by the Korean president was Choi Kyu-ha, only 8 months. And in the Japanese case, Mr. Hatta Tsutomu served as prime minister only for 2 months, 64 days. Now let's take a look at this Japanese parliamentary system, where people, citizens at the bottom left, elect the member of parliament, which is called diet in Japan. We have upper house, shugi-in, lower house, sangi-in. And they elect in their own electoral district the national representatives. And they form Japanese or Congress or parliament, which is called the diet in the Japanese, the English term of Japanese language. And then, because Japan has a indirect cabinet system, people don't choose their top leader, prime minister, via their own vote. The prime minister and the ministers are chosen among the selected diet members, particularly incumbent, the ruling party. And the prime minister, well, we are talking about, there's orange box on the top right. The prime minister has to be the member of diet, first of all. But when it comes to cabinet members, which is called daijin, kokumu daijin in Japanese, at least half of the cabinet members should be elected diet members. And we have these two. If you look at those, bottom left, right, bottom right box, we have a shugiin, which is head of representatives, or sangiin, house of councillors. The shugiin actually is more powerful, and shugiin has the power to carry on no confidence motion if shugiin really reaches this decision. The cabinet actually should withdraw. Then before that, the Japanese president, the prime minister, has the right to dissolve the House of Representatives. That's why, because of this, prime minister's right to dissolve House of Representatives, there have been so many elections. Naturally, so many the prime minister who are the one member of elected diet members. So on the right box, the prime minister and more than half of the ministers are members of diet, as I said. The Liberal Democratic Party, usually called LDP, today's incumbent party, has been maintaining superiority over so many years. We'll talk about that shortly. So that was a really primary reason of Japanese politics being stable. No frequent changes of change of power and policies. In a Korean scene, which we have actually direct, participation of people in selecting national leader, we have different mechanism. Here at the bottom, we have citizens, voters. On the left side, people elect a member of National Assembly. We call it National Assembly in each districts, and some are national proportionate representatives. Anyway, those elected people become member of National Assembly. But National Assembly has no power to directly form a government because we have a presidential system. Okay? We have a completely separation of power of legislature and government and the courts. So when at the day of national election day for presidents, people take a vote, and the winner becomes the president who actually reside in a particular palace in the recent President Moon. But as we said earlier, President Yoon moved out of that blue house, presidential residence, but moved to a different place. But anyway, the elected president formed a cabinet, and the Korean cabinet cannot be taken away, solved by the votes by National Assembly. National Assembly and administration, government are two separate entities. Now, I'm sorry that there are so many lines, but I really want you to have a solid grasp of post-war political scene in terms of power structure, in terms of building National Assembly, Diet, and also the executive branches. At top of the slide, we have yellowish lines starting from 1910 to 1945. That is the reason, the period when Japanese Empire at the time annexed and ruled Korea. So 1945 is the year for liberation for the Koreans. And that year, Japan got defeated in the war with the USA, right? As you remember, they were actually dropping of nuclear bombs in Nagasaki or Hiroshima, etc. So finally, Japan, declared defeat to the U.S. So really modern government building in Korea began in 1946. And we had the first president called Mr. Lee Sing-man on the left side, you see, in 1948. At the same year, sadly enough, Korea got broken into two pieces, North and South. In the North Korea, there was a young leader, Kim Il-sung, who is the grandfather of today's Kim Jong-un, who became the leader of North Korea. And on the right side, Japanese, this cabinet system had a long history. So even before that Pacific War, there was the same cabinet system. But just once, and I will just read out the names of prime minister since 1946. There was a prime minister, Yoshida Shigeru, a very famous person who is a kind of bureaucratic background, and he has been a really important figure in building post-war Japanese administrative schemes and organizations in consultation with the U.S. government, which was at the time in charge of Japan. And then there was a prime minister, PM stands for a prime minister, Katayama Tetsu. And in 1948, very shortly, two people, Ashida Hitoshi and Yoshida Shigeru, again. So Yoshida Shigeru came back in power in 1948. And in 1950, there was a Korean War. Now, if you look at the lines above, South Korea under Lee Sing-man and North Korea under Kim Il-sung really had a full scale war, North and South. Really sad story for Koreans. So it lasted until 1953. As at that time, as you know, American forces, particularly under General MacArthur, really almost colonized Korea. I mean, they took a real control, Japan, real control of Japan. So American government actually made decisions for the nation of Japan, particularly during the Korean War. There were many U.S. soldiers who actually participated in the Korean War from the bases in Japan. And the war ended in 1953, and in 1954 there was a new Prime Minister, Hatoyama Ichiro. Then 1955 is a very important year in Japanese political history. Please remember this. In 1955, a Liberal Party and Democratic Party decide to become one. So we have Liberal Democratic Party today. The short for that is LDP. So you might have heard LDP from time to time, referring to the incumbent party of Japan. And after that, we have a really very able, very well-known prime minister who are basically economic specialists. So this Ishibashi Tanzan, Kishi Nobusuke, Ikeda Hayato were all actually, in a sense, drivers of post-war Japanese economic miracle engine. And Kishi Nobusuke, in the line of 1957, is the grandparents of Abe Shinzo. Kishi Nobusuke, as daughter, is Abe Shinzo's the mother. So Mr. Kishi is Abe Shinzo's grandfather-in-law. And also Ikeda Hayato is also a very famous administrator, prime minister, who are very good at economic planning and management. And then 1960, Korea was still, a very early stage of political development. There were many after the Korean War. The society was not really orderly, and the new movements, new actually calls from the people in many areas really created really, in a sense, turmoils, many demonstrations, political movements, etc. In that, amid that atmosphere, President Lee stepped down in 1960. So he ruled more than 12 years. But as a footnote, President Lee was a really, in a sense, unique figure. During the Japanese colonial period, he moved to Hawaii. Then he also moved to the continental US and got a PhD in Princeton University in political science. And he married an Austrian woman and then came back to Korea. So at that time, if you recall that early 90s and 1940s and 80s, when really modern cultures and institutions are rare in Korea, we have a really American PhD with an Austrian wife in Korea, and who became the national leader. Actually, it's a really rare, unique combination of a political leader and the social atmosphere at that time, I think. Then we have this 1961. We have a really important turning point that young General Park Chung-hee, who was a two-star of army at the time, staged a coup d'etat and took the power. So that leads to, in a sense, second stage. But before that, let me talk about these two. I just selected two figures from Korea and Japan. President Lee Seung-man, who actually was president from 1948 to 60. He was educated in the US, and he was very much anti-Japanese. Actually, according to the books about him, in Hawaii, he organized many anti-Japanese, movement groups too. And on the right is Kishi Nobusuke, who was in prime minister not too many years, but he is a very able economic bureaucrat in Manchuria. As you know, Japanese Imperial Japan ruled Manchuria for many years until, again, 1945. So Mr. Kishi was a key economic bureaucrat, top economic bureaucrat of Manchurian state under Japanese rule. Also, his family has a full of politicians. I mean, let me take just two. One is his brother, real brother, as a Prime Minister Sato Eisaku. We'll see him. Mr. Sato is also very famous, reputable prime minister. And his grandson-in-law, Mr. Abe Shinzo, actually became a prime minister, the longest serving prime minister lately. So this formative stage. On the left side, please note that I put blue, pink color on three presidents from Park Chung-hee, Chun Doo-hwan, Roh Tae-woo. They have one commonality. What is that? They are all army, not Air Force, not Navy, Army generals, also two stars. So ex-Army, which is a Major General in ranking, ex-Major General Park Chung-hee, ex-Major General Chun Doo-hwan, ex-Major General Roh Tae-woo became the presidents. And they ruled for how many years? Now from 1963 to 91, 28 years. So, I mean, if you really take a new, fresh look at this history, in the really modernizing Korean history of the 60s and 70s, 80s, were ruled by 3 ex-army generals. Okay, this is really interesting, really, aspect. And one important aspect of that period is these people are very pro-Japanese. Park Chung-hee actually attended Japanese military academy. So he had a Japanese name and he was an officer of Japanese Imperial Army. And even after liberation of 1945, we can say safely that Korean bureaucratic society, including professional soldiers, were very pro-Japanese in their value, in their outlook and in their attitudes, etc. So naturally, in this formative stage of 60s, 70s, 80s, 3 decades, Japan and Korea had a really good relationship. We will later discuss the current late controversy between Japan and Korea, such as forced labor during Pacific War, or even military sex slave taken from Korean, etc. Those things happened during the Pacific War, before and during the Pacific War. But during this period of 3 decades, those major events, episodes which took place before 1960, it was 1940s, never surfaced, never mentioned in official language. So that means at the time, Korean government and the Japanese government had no quarrel, not even consciousness of those historical sensitive history issues that actually got attention after those periods. So during this formative stage, during which Japanese really succeeded in creating Japanese economic miracle to the whole world. Okay, you see, Japan became a really fast-growing economy and became the almost number 1 manufacturers of electronic gadgets, automobiles, etc. What is this period? Okay, 60s and 70s and 80s, and we have Prime Minister Sato Eisaku. And then in 1965, there was a very important historical event that Korea and Japan normalized their relationship. No more quarrel about Japanese rule until 1945. So, there's a very important the treaties in which Japanese government and Korean government promised not to debate anymore. And there was actually those treaty about compensating those difficulties or the harms inflicted by the Japanese imperial rule during the colonial period. So in that sense, Japan and Korea's historical problems were normalized. So the two countries became normal neighbors. So throughout this period, there was no debate, no quarrel about those, contemporary, those historical debates or problems that are taking lots of attention these days. Okay, and from Tanaka Kakue, who was called really bulldozer, with a computer attached. He only went to middle school, and he became a powerful figure and prime minister. Was a really success story in Japanese political history. Then we have Miki Takeo, Fukuda Takeo, Ohira Masayoshi, Suzuki Zenko, Nakasone Yasuhiro, I mean, all these people are worth mentioning, but Nakasone Yasuhiro was a really also powerful prime minister, and he, who was actually a Navy officer during a Pacific War, had a really good relationship with Park Chung-hee, Chun Doo-hwan, and Roh Tae-woo, because they are all, in a sense, officers, army officers. And Takeshita Noboru, and then we had very prime minister during a short period, Uno Sosuke and Kaifu Toshiki and Miyazawa Kiichi. And I think we will, talk about these people when we talk about particular issues in politics and economic and management later. Now, among those presidents and prime ministers, I'd like to pick two people. Of course, President Park Chung-hee, army general, and then who became national reformer. He ruled for over 3 decades, and during his tenure, Korea became. It is a real fact that Korea became a poor country to a quite, almost affluent country with really developed industries. And the person on the left who is shaking hands with Park Chung-hee is actually Kishi Nobusuke. Well, Kishi Nobusuke, according to many Koreans, is very hardcore right-wing person. But they were quite, intimate, I think. As you see, there is no interpreter, right? That means they are speaking same language. Which one? The Japanese. Because, President Park was a cadet of Japanese, academy, the Army Academy, and he actually had a Japanese name. Okay. And on the right side is actually, the fourth person from the left is Nakasone Yasuhiro. I had a chance to interview him for twice when he was still alive. He passed away. And as you remember, in mid-90s, 1985, was actually the period of privatization, liberalization of all sorts of firms, telephone companies, electric companies. So under Reagan, Thatcher, and Nakasone, three leaders of capitalistic states pushed very hard of privatization of industry and economies. So that was actually really important, 1984, 85, 86, etc. Okay, important era of post-war economic history, and the relation between Ronald Reagan and Nakasone Yasuhiro was so close. There's some Rohn-Yasu relationship. In a sense, Rohn-Yasu relationship of U.S. and Japan was the really main engine of era of period of privatization and liberalization of mid-1980s. Okay. All right, then. Sorry again for too many lines, but I need to summarize this third stage in one slide. I'll call it maturity stage. On the left, but key fact is that three presidents are in green: Kim Dae-jung, Roh Moo-hyun, Moon Jae-in. Even if you haven't traveled to Korea, you will be at least familiar with those names. They are common in green. Why? They are first actually presidents from the Democratic Party. So before that means Korean government has been on the conservative right-wing party all along. The first non-Republican, non-conservative party leader who became president was Kim Dae-jung. Kim Dae-jung was a really smart person, but he had gone through so many difficulties. For instance, he was in Kyoto and he was kidnapped by Korean CIA and taken back to Korea on a very small boat across the East Sea or Sea of Japan. But after so many hardships, so many difficult times, he became a good president in 1998. Also, he was really open-minded with Japan. So in 2000, he was very close to Prime Minister Obuchi Keizo in the line 1998. They decided to really normalize Japan-Korea relationship. So they co-hosted, Olympic Games. And then we had on the right side, we had the Japanese Prime Minister. Let me read one by one. Hosokawa Morihiro and Hatatsutomu Murayama Tomiichi and Hashimoto Ryutaro. Then we have Obuchi Keijo. And then we have this Mori Yoshiro, Koizumi Junichiro, and Abe Shinzo in blue. And Abe Shinzo come again in the below. So why have I colored these people in same color? Because they belong to a same party faction. Well, we will talk about Japanese party factions inside the LDP later. But the reason why this should be noted is that they belong to a faction called Seiwakai, which is very hardcore right-wing. And so from Mori Yoshiro, Koizumi Junichiro, then Abe Shinzo, prior Japanese LDP factions who are more liberal, in a sense more dovish with Korea and other countries. But these Koizumi, Mori Koizumi and Abe government has been very right wing. I mean, they think that Japan is a particular nation, and they also emphasize the relation with the U.S. very much. So the term called Nichibei, well, simply is Japan, U.S. But they think that this U.S.-Japan axis should be the main basis of not only Japanese diplomacy, but actually global order. So they are very pro-American, very conservative, and critical of Korean and Chinese claims on historical issues. Then we have Fukuda Takeo and Aso Taro. And three people, Hatoyama Yukio, Kan Naoto, Noda Yoshihiko, are in yellow. Why? They come from non-LDP. As they come from a Democratic Party. We just mentioned that the LDP, Liberal Democratic Party, was established in 1955. So up to 2022, we are how many years? 77 years, right? 65 years, I'm sorry. During which entire period has been ruled by whom? LDP, except for that particular period from 2009 to 11. So I counted days that three non-LDP politicians ruled Japan for 2,080 days, roughly 5 years, 6 years. So the entire postal period, close to 70 years, LDP lost power only for 6 years. That means a lot. We will talk about this in LDP politics and Japanese conservatism, and their very pro-American diplomatic view, and also the relation with close Asian countries. So I'll just pick two persons from stage. One is Mr. Kim Dae-jung. But Kim Dae-jung, in the mind of Koreans, is that he did not have a university education, but he's a very smart person. He had gone through many hardships as a politician, but had a very strong will. Also, he had open mind, and he also opened the path of Korean society in terms of, improvement with North Korean relationship. So he was a really first pronounced unificationist, a president who took the initiative to really realize the unification of South and North Korea. He visited North Korea, so he was quite well accepted by Kim Jong-il, current leader Kim Jong-un's father. So, and the Mrs. Kim also went to Pyongyang together. On the right is Mr. Abe Shinzo, who was born in 1954 and passed away, this year, lately. We just mentioned he was being the prince of Sewakai, particular conservative, pro-American faction inside LDP. Also, during his tenure, he has been pursuing the notion of Japan as a common country. Ordinary country that is allowed, that is able to have a self-defense capabilities. That means there is no regular army in Japan today. Still, they have Japan self-defense forces, right? Army, Navy, ground, naval and air, which is not full-fledged forces. They have to only function in alliance with the U.S. military. But Prime Minister Abe really began the dialogue, began the social discourse about Japan becoming rearming as a full-fledged, forces. So he sent, many, naval ships to, Middle East area, etc. So this is the actual scene of Mr. Abe, taking the, overseeing the ceremony carried out by Japanese self-defense forces. Okay, let me summarize today's talk in three key statements. Both the Korean Peninsula and the Japanese archipelago began a new journey after World War II, yet on different paths. Japan continued the path of the parliamentary system under the official rule of the imperial family. On the other hand, the Korean Peninsula was divided into a capitalistic state in the south and a communist state in the north. South Korea adopted the presidential system. Japan and South Korea have maintained close ties with the United States, yet the relation between the two countries, Japan and South Korea, have had ups and downs depending on the tendency of the ruling parties of both countries. Okay, this is for today. Your support, your continued, interest will be very much appreciated. And if you have any question or comments to make, please feel free to contact me at that email address. Thank you very much.